I'm going to ask Marion to introduce and tell you a little bit about Julie.
Well, it's not only a delight to have Julie with us, but it's good to have all of you with us also. And it's kind of exciting because Julie grew up in Cornwall, went to Middlebury Union High School, then on to Middlebury College. She started her athletic administration, career lit perhaps, at Middlebury College. Then she went on to do historical things, like becoming the first woman commissioner of Division II, Northeast-10, just sports. Can't you just see Julie going through that glass? Male-dominated area, and Julie did it. Now, she's going on, and her leadership has resulted not only in athletic prowess with the Division II, but also the athletes have graduated at unprecedented levels with an 89% success rate, unheard of in collegiate sports. So we have a real leader here. And it's kind of fun thinking she grew up right here. And near and dear to us, as you can see from her t-shirt, she is a leader nationally, but also in women's leaders in collegiate sports. So without further ado, we'll hear about the journey.
Thank you. Thank you, Marion. And I will certainly say that it is so much fun to have a personal reason to come back home. And what better way than to really spend some time with all of you tonight. You may walk out of here knowing more about the NCAA and everything that's wrong about the NCAA and everything that's right about the NCAA, but certainly very informal. Interrupt me, wave your arms if you have a question. We don't have to wait till the end. I wanted to give you, my background, my path, and then talk obviously about some of the most pressing issues facing really higher education and athletics as a part of that. And I am forever blessed to have had the experiences growing up here in Cornwall and Middlebury and skiing for the Bill Coakley, probably by age, 6? Jack Eccles was out there, right? He was my coach. Betsy and Kathy were teammates of mine. I was trying to think 4-time state champions, and I think back about my path a lot. And maybe there weren't a ton of female mentors at that time and at that place, but certainly male mentorship going back that now almost 30 years or over 30 years has certainly an important feature. So just a little bit about me. As I said, MUHS class of 1987. I skied on the Nordic ski team. I had, I think, at least a couple seasons on the JV team with Gail Jetty, who hasn't at some point. And at the time, I don't even know that there was girls soccer at the high school. I know there wasn't girls lacrosse, certainly high school sports in general, but Middlebury was known for its skiing prowess. And we were fortunate to have, and I think Judy's in the red vest, Judy Larson, who came from the college. And boy, what a mentor and what a leader she was for our ski team back in the day. So I'd like to think none of us have aged so very much, but I see some familiar faces. Facebook keeps us connected with quite a few of them. I found my way in Seattle, I think a few years ago professionally. I had to make a trip out there, and Betsy and I connected out there. So you never know sort of where your journey takes you, but for me, it all started here. So I graduated my technical classes 1992, mostly because I was enjoying myself and decided to stay around, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I graduated with a bachelor's degree in political science and minor or concentration in American literature, and of course, ended up in college sports. Actually had every intention of being a lawyer in going into sports law. I think my interest in sports probably started really early with My grandfather was a professional football player, 1929-ish, pre-pads, and he was a Red Sox fan, and we spent a lot of time in being fans of Boston sports. I spent one summer literally scoring and listening to every single Red Sox game for a whole summer. That might be my most unusual trivia bit for myself. But early on, had a real love of sport, and I remember distinctly having the opportunity to go to a Red Sox game in 6th grade, and the next day read about it in the Globe. And I thought, someone's job is to write about the Red Sox game, and I thought that was pretty darn cool. So early on, love for baseball definitely propelled things. When I got to Middlebury, of course, I had quite a background as being what I would say a townie, and I was talking to Jane a little while ago, but as I was thinking about all the things that I did while I was at Middlebury, an awful lot of that was as a result of the familiarity with people in town. And no one ever said no to me. So I got here and knew that this interested me, and so probably I think it must have been my sophomore year, Bob Smith, I ended up managing the baseball team for Coach Smith and Coach Bandigo. I'm not sure they knew what to do with me. I went on their spring trip to Florida. I think I stayed in the same room as Coach Bandigo because they're like, well, we can't put her anywhere else. That would definitely not happen today. But I know that their support, two of my best high school friends, Dave Cole and Doug Ginnivan, were on that team. And I know that their collective support, while I was managing that team, it never dawned on me that it was unusual. And I think that's sometimes what it takes. It's like you don't know what you don't know, and I didn't know not to, to think that it was going to be truly so unusual. So, we had quite the adventures as with the baseball team. I was also the student head of winter sports for Carnival, so I ran it's the largest student-run winter carnival, but I was in charge of the races, and so that was like an early entree into that you could actually do this as a it was someone's task to make sure those races went off seamlessly. So while I was here, I did a J-term project for Tom Lawson, and Russ Riley was there, and they sent me up to spend a day at UVM with the AD at the time, Denny Lambert, and his assistant was a gentleman named Rick Farnham. And then I spent another day at St. Michael's College with their AD at the time, Ed Markey, and their assistant AD was Chris Kenny, who was assistant AD for sports information. And it sort of opened up my eyes around that there was these administrative possibilities. And I made myself pretty visible around the athletic department at Middlebury. I wrote for this paper. I worked in sports information for Max Peterson was his name. Got to know Dave Sears. I mean, I think about all these people that were so influential to me. And so when I should have been graduating, there was I don't know how to describe it other than there was a one-year presidency by Tim Light. Does anybody remember that, right? And one of the people that he got rid of on his way out was Max Peterson. And they were told they couldn't replace Max, but they needed to have the function of the job. And so Tom Lawson called me, and he said, I have an opportunity for you, and you have one more class to take before you graduate, so let's delay that till the spring, and you'll work full-time for basically like no money. But it was what I loved, and so I became the student. I went on to work, and I'll get back to that in a second, but I went on to start my career basically because I was here, and they were like, this is perfect for you. So it is pretty amazing. I mentioned all those people that I interviewed during that J-term experience with, and now Chris Kenny's the AD at St. Michael's. Rick Farnham was on the search committee that hired me at the America East Conference in my first job. Jeff Schulman is one of my best friends. He's now the AD at UVM. So you never know sort of where these people that you're going to come across are going to end up being very meaningful individuals professionally and personally. My husband, John, is the Deputy Director of Athletics at Bryant University. So we have an institutional person, a conference person. We have twins that are now 20. This picture here is my son with a Bryant lacrosse jersey, and this picture is from last week as a sophomore on the Bryant men's lacrosse team. So wished it into happening. And my daughter is living life large, University of Alabama. And football fan, and so I had to get her into the slide somehow, as she's gone to the dark side of Division I athletics. So I said, Middlebury College Special Assistant to the Director of Athletics, Sports Information Director. I was in charge of writing the game stories and statistics, and for every sport. With the help of Carolyn LaRose. God bless her. I was 22 years old, and I loved it. I went to the office every day, and again, no one said no. So I did these things. I filed stories. It was definitely before, the internet. So it was like you fax things and you called people to make sure scores were in. And it so happens during that year, Middlebury opened up the football press stadium, right? That football press box was new. I got to know Andy Gardner, who was writing for the Free Press at the time. And Middlebury teams, it was pre-NCAA, so Middlebury NESCAC had a rule where you couldn't go to the NCAA tournaments, and the ECAC tournaments meant everything. I lived in a suite. I lived in a suite with my friend Brent, who was the goalie on the hockey team, my two friends that were the baseball, Doug and Dave. I hung out with all the GAs, and I went to work every day. And over the course of that year, we hosted a number of championships in the ECAC. I will never forget the day that Mickey Heineken took me in and sat me down in front of a whiteboard about this size and taught me how football formations are done. Because I was just really needing to learn sort of the ground up. And I think back on Dave teaching me how to do the scorebook at basketball games, because I sat next to him as the announcer, and it was a really special year for me. And of course, the people from the ECAC were at all of those championships that Middlebury hosted. And so by the spring, they said, you really need to apply for this internship. It's very prestigious, and we think you'd be a great candidate. So I applied to that, and was selected as an intern, and started, that was based on the Cape at the time, and went down there as the communications intern and just kept doing my thing, and we got great exposure over that year. That's a pretty, at the time, was a great internship, because you got exposure to Divisions 1, 2, and 3, and back then, that conference still meant a lot. So in probably April of my intern year, I got a call, and someone said, how do you feel about Orono, Maine? And I said, I grew up in Middlebury, Vermont. And I went through the search process and was hired at age, I suppose it must have been age 23, as the Assistant Commissioner for Communications at America East Conference. And to say I've never looked back. I spent 15 years in my first job, I have there, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I know that certain things happened along the way where I was lucky to meet the people I did or to interact with the people I did, but I also know that when I had that opportunity, I made everything, I just took advantage of every opportunity, and I was good at what I did. And I didn't care that I was 23 and I might have been the only person in the office under 60, and they, my first boss literally didn't know he was just like, Julie, whatever you want. So I went from assistant commissioner for communications. Then within 2 years, I was running all of our championships. I had met my husband. He worked for the Atlantic 10 conference at the time. And as I said, I spent 15 years there. The office moved from Maine to Boston in '97. And so I stayed and worked for the conference in Boston. And then I was commuting an hour and 45 minutes each way into Boston, and it was awful. And the school that my husband was at was in the Northeast-10 at the time, and their commissioner was leaving. And it was 20 minutes from our house, and I knew I could do the job. And so I applied for that job in May of 2008, and I remember distinctly saying, in the job interview process, I know this job, I can do this job, I just need to learn the people, and you won't be disappointed. So I was named commissioner in May of 2008, and at the time, as Marion said, I was the first full-time commissioner in Division II, which was 24 conferences, with about I suppose about a 35-year history of the division itself being in Division II. I said here, I know the font's pretty small. There's the second appointment. My colleague Jackie was named commissioner 4 years later. So those first 4 years were absolutely lonely. But the past three in the last 6 months have all been women. So now there's 7 of us. When the NCAA releases its demographic statistics, at one point after I got hired, the NCAA issues this annual report, and it was like, Division II made a 4% increase year over year, and I'm like, yeah, that's me. 4%. 4%. And I remember during my internship year, hearing about the first woman that had been hired across all 3 divisions. She was named the commissioner of the Patriot League. So, I think it's really, it's about seeing people who look like you in those roles. It's having men in the room that weren't afraid to let you do your job and didn't look at you any differently. And that is still as true today as it is because there's still a lot of work to do. So, I'd say this is my very dry job description. Like in my contract, these are the things. They are so general, but I won't read them. But basically, I'm supposed to oversee the strategic direction of a Division II conference. We have, that says 14, it's a little outdated, we actually have 12 member institutions, and we do have 24 sports. So, you can see there sort of all the stuff, but I will tell you, on a daily basis, what I do is troubleshoot. I pray that we have enough game officials. I hope that parents and fans behave themselves. I act as a general manager. I'm some days a counselor. Other days I'm a playing rules expert. I would say I adjudicate, I mediate. I'm a brand ambassador. I'm a policy maker. And no day is ever the same. Not one day. I spent last Thursday reviewing, men's lacrosse film for a game at St. Michael's because, the officials made a wrong, not even a judgment call because we're not allowed to question judgment calls, but a wrong interpretation of the rules, and a student athlete was ejected, and so we spent back and forth with the coordinator. So, that's just like, that took up the whole day, and I had a whole lot of other things to get done that day. So that is, though, what happens when, you're in this role. We have a staff of 5 people, so we're, working with, I always say, when the Big Ten has about 50 people on staff, and I'm like hauling boxes and hanging up banners at championships, You can bet your money that Greg Sankey here earns about $4 million a year as commissioner of the SEC is not doing those things. But it's, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's funny, when my kids were young, I don't know if this was second grade, they were asked, "What does your mom do?" And the answer they gave to the teacher, who actually, when we saw her, told us this, they said, our mom goes to meetings and goes to games, and she never, ever cares who wins, which is true, and it's still true. Because there's partisan fans out there, and I am not one of them. All I care about is that we get to the end of the game, and there's no issues, which happens less and less these days. So Marion asked me to just sort of give some highlights of what I've done so far. We've had 19 national championship teams across 6 team sports. We're absolutely known for our lacrosse, men's and women's lacrosse. We've won national championships in women's basketball, men's soccer and women's soccer, field hockey, and then runner-up in 16 other runner-up titles in sports like baseball and softball, which you wouldn't even really think that we could be competitive given the short window we have to play, a la snowstorm last week here. Marion mentioned we're really proud of our student athletes in our conference. They graduate. The NCAA defines success in graduation as graduating for 6 years from the date of matriculation. So 89% of our student athletes graduate within 6 years, right? As parents, probably all wanted them to go through in 4. It doesn't happen as much when in athletics when you sometimes have extra years, but we far exceed the national average, and we're super proud of what they do with their time in the classroom. Bullet 3, definitely one of my highlights professionally. I represented the division on the Constitution Committee. I was one of 5 individuals selected from the entire Division II membership and the lone commissioner. Sometimes you have this moment, a little bit imposter syndrome, but certainly that was one of those where I was sitting around with the president of Georgetown and the president of Georgia and the movers and shakers in Division I, and there were 5 of us representing Division II and 5 people representing Division III. The chair of the committee was Secretary Gates, who was President Bush's defense secretary, if I'm not mistaken. It's just one of those moments where you're like, what am I doing in this room? But it was a phenomenal professional experience. And then you can see here, our strategic plan is, I think, pretty special. And then we launched in 2018 a digital network that requires all of our institutions to stream all of their games and have play-by-play. And so we weren't one of those leagues that just said, just do football and men's basketball, and if you can do women's basketball, that's fine. We're like, nope. They had a 3-year phase-in, and all of our sports, all of our team sports, all 12 of them, must be streamed. And then, of course, we expanded our academic awards program to reflect, to really reflect the quality student athletes that we have in our conference. So I'm big on committee service. I think servant leadership is one of the most important aspects of being in a position like mine, and being that, as I said, a brand ambassador really almost every day. So I actually have I was putting this all together, I have a pretty lengthy history of committee service, which I'm really pleased about. I talked about that Constitution Committee. I'm currently the chair of the Strategic Vision and Planning Committee, which is tasked with developing the Division II strategic plan and allocating money over the next the life of the next CBS contract, which I'm sure if you're at all a college sports fan, you know that CBS basically provides 95% of the revenue to the NCAA through the men's basketball tournament, although the women's basketball is finally going to get its due, right? Thanks, Caitlin Clark. This is just a bit of the, this is another one of those imposter syndrome moments. I was on a panel I'm not quite sure how I found myself on this panel, but that's the AD from Michigan. That's the AD in the upper right corner from Washington State. And then there was me. That was like, all right, one of these is not like the other. So that was, I figured I'd throw that in there for you. Just, a little bit about the NE10. Again, if you haven't followed St. Michael's athletics, urge you to do so. There's some tremendous things happening up in Colchester. But our NE10 brand, this is things that we've developed over the last, since I've been here, but our mission in serving our student athletes and our institutions. I use the word opportunity a lot because I believe in our league, without the opportunity to play college sports, there's thousands of student athletes that wouldn't find their way to college otherwise. And there's such a small percentage that find their way onto Division I rosters, and Division II and III really are the vast majority of the NCAA membership. And Division II has this unique positioning of where Division III doesn't give athletic aid. The Division II does what's called partial scholarships, so you don't have to give a full scholarship. For us, it's about meeting these future student athletes where they are and providing them an opportunity to get a really good education. And in our league, that can be urban in Boston. It can be rural in Rindge, New Hampshire. If you haven't been to Franklin Pierce, it is remote. It can be, single cell business school. It can be, programs known for nursing. We have a school on Long Island. We have membership in New York, Westchester County. So, it's really important for us to provide these opportunities for all of our future leaders to have an opportunity to play sports and go to college and find those opportunities. So this is just a little bit more about our brand, but certainly being forward-thinking, using our influence, and being student-centric is a key to this. I apologize. I thought I had wiped out Lemoyne, but they are still on the map. But this is a current map, and Lemoyne left for Division I last spring, so we're actually at 12. And unfortunately, which I think is probably going to happen a lot more now moving forward, the College of St. Rose announced December 1st that they were closing as an institution. And there's been, even here in Vermont, right? Southern Vermont, Green Mountain, Goddard last week, the merger of Northern Vermont, Linden and Johnson. Higher ed is in crisis for sure. There's 5 schools in the Boston area that can be $91,000 next year. $91,000. Middlebury is probably 85. So there's just this ever-increasing cost to educate students, meeting with a discount rate, that's not sustainable. So unfortunately, St. Rose is closing, so we'll be at 11 members for next year. And then our sports sponsorship is there.
Julie, I have a question.
Yeah.
This is a really ignorant question.
Yeah.
I don't know what NC-10 stands for.
Northeast-10. NE-10. Northeast-10.
But why is it 10 when you have, I don't get why it's 10.
No idea. It's like the Big 12 doesn't really have 12 at some point. So evidently, pre-me, we started, when the conference founded, it was Northeast 6. And then they added someone, they changed their name. They went through the whole rigmarole to change their name to 7. And then they changed their name to Northeast 8. And then they added 2 and changed their name to Northeast 10. And at some point, someone got smart enough to realize they were spending a lot of money to change the name and register all that stuff and change logos every time a membership. I can't even imagine. And we weren't able to drop the number because the Northeast Conference existed.
I'm not crazy.
You were not crazy. And so I like to think of us as the Big 12 of Division II, which is that we're so good it doesn't matter what number we have. But we do have 10. I fear the day that we would lose another member institution and actually be at 10, so I'm okay with being at 11 or 12. We're trying. These dots are basically a dot chart of NCAA member institutions. We're lucky we're not in Montana, where there's only 3, 1 Division II and 2 Division I's. So blue is Division I, orange is Division II, and Division III is green. So obviously Division III, I mean the vast majority, right, of institutions are east of the Mississippi anyway. But Division II, we're very proud. This is Vancouver, British Columbia. Simon Fraser University is a Division II member. And way up there, Alaska Anchorage and Fairbanks are both Division II members. How'd you like those travel costs? Frequent flyer miles for student athletes flying here. They're in a conference with these groups right here, these orange schools. So that's a conference game. Yeah, and our coaches complain about going from Colchester to Waltham or Worcester. Like, you guys, this school right here, Montana State Billings, is in this conference. They take sleeper buses, you know, get in, and they have sleeper cars and trains. They have sleeper buses, and they bus it. And then we have Division II also has 2 schools in Hawaii. Oh, wow. Yeah, so it is quite, quite a diverse, NCAA membership, and so I'll just focus. Division III here, there's 434 Division III members. There is 300 Division II members, and Division III, I think the smallest enrollment of a Division III institution is 250 students. The largest is 26,000, right? Some of the big state universities that still said they don't want to give out athletic scholarships, and so that's the defining characteristic of all these schools. The 2 divisions sponsor about an equal amount of championships, and one of the things I think that is unique for me is having the Division III experience. And then 15 years in Division I, and now 16 years in Division II. So when I talk about these 3 divisions and the value that I think Division II brings to the NCAA landscape, it's with sort of personal, personal knowledge. So that's the NCAA in a nutshell. And really, Division II does a lot more with less people, right? They do things with a fraction of the budget. Here. So they're in what's called the Pac-West Conference. So they play a lot of these California schools and Arizona. No, we don't have any. There's no Division II schools, and there's only I should know this. There's no Division II schools in Arizona, Maine, Rhode Island. I thought there was 5. But so yeah, the Pac-West. So again, that's it's all about how you schedule regular season. And again, I'm so happy you don't have those headaches, because for us, we're about 6 hours north to south, and now with losing Lemoyne to Division I, we're about 4 hours east to west. So fairly tight geography. But yeah, there are some student athletes that sign up for even up here in the UP, right? They're competing with these schools. Over here, that's significant travel to play your sport. I will move through these because I apologize. This is terribly small. I did not expect it to be so small. You can find all this information on the NCAA website, but I just wanted to, if some of you were unfamiliar with how the NCAA does its business, this is association-wide. The highest governing group in the NCAA is the Board of Governors. And it's weighted towards Division I membership, but you'll see here the primary decision-making bodies in the 3 divisions. These are the practitioners, ADs, faculty members, senior women administrators that guarantee women, that there's women around the table, and then the board of directors or executive board or president's council. These are primarily presidents. But for Division II, as of last January, 2 student athletes sit on that executive board. So there's 9 presidents, 2 student athletes, and the 2 student athletes have a vote. And they'll have a vote now. Student athletes now have a vote through almost every committee in the NCAA structure now has a student athlete voting for student athlete voice. It's hard to argue when the courts tell you that you're taking advantage of student athletes to not give them a vote on issues that are of importance to them. again, totally apologize, this is really small. Division II process, Division III process. One of the things I would just tell you is that here, Division II is still one school, one vote. Every school, the 300 schools get together once a year in January and vote on rules changes. And so here's, this is the strategic planning and finance. All of these committees would feed through this management council and then to the executive board. And this is a similar process for Division III. We have 23 conferences. Division III has 44, I think. So Middlebury's, you know, the NESCAC's one of those 44 conferences. Yeah, they still operate one school, one vote as well. And I think the only other thing that I'll just say is, in terms of defining characteristics, Division I has the ability, when they're recruiting student athletes, to offer multi-year offers of aid. Someone can be told, you come here, you'll get, you know, your scholarship for X number of years, and you know, we'll pay for cost of attendance, so it's above even just the athletic costs to go to school, but you'll get cost of attendance costs. And then Division II's, as I said, partial scholarship model, and Division III can't give athletic aid. So about 80% of Division III student athletes are on, receive some sort of non-athletic aid, institutional merit, financial need, so their needs are met. Although, no one's ever going to convince me that D3 coaches aren't out there figuring out who needs to be on their rosters, right? There's a reason Middlebury College is successful at what they do. They're not giving athletic aid, but they're, you know, across Division III, it's just pulling it from a different bucket, right? So, you know, Sarah's coming to school here, and she's got unmet need, and that unmet need is met, you know, and she's choosing to come there. So this next section is really, this is about all the things you're going to hear that people say are wrong with the NCAA. This is our, you know, modernizing and transforming. There's over 500,000 student athletes. They're, you know, giving out $3.8 billion in athletic scholarships. 75% of the Olympic team participated in college sports, but it's all changing, and it's really changing because of state laws that are being put into place. It's changing because of legal cases that have completely changed the face of the NCAA. And so one of the highest priorities of the association is, and again, I apologize, these are the 5 sort of tenets of what we're working on with Congress to try and ideally set up some sort of, in an ideal world, antitrust exemption. So we'd be free to make our own rules without fear of being sued literally at every turn. So, you know, part of this is, of course, making sure that they're taking care of the Division I student athletes, the student athletes, you know, who are on the fields performing while conferences are raking in billions and billions of dollars in football and basketball deals. And so there's been a whole lot of new rules in place around Division I, what you have to fund. The NCAA is now funding 2 years post eligibility. If you got hurt during college, the NCAA will cover health care for 2 years related to that injury. Division I schools are required to fund for 10 years past graduation, past you leaving the school, your ability to come back and earn your degree. Schools have to guarantee access to mental health and well-being resources. So there's a lot of good things happening that probably should have been happening all along. It's just that some legal cases sort of forced some hands. NIL is probably the one thing, if you pick up a paper these days, it's kind of this, it's created an atmosphere where especially basketball players and, you know, high visible student athletes are earning money for their name, image, and likeness. That's what NIL stands for. So name, image, and likeness. And that's sort of a wild, wild west right now, because the courts have said that the NCAA can't control nor, really control what the institutions, and the institutions can't control the whole atmosphere. So you have these collectives that are, you know, John Calipari left Kentucky to go to Arkansas because Mr. Purdue Chicken is the Arkansas biggest donor, and he gave Calipari $5 million in NIL money to distribute to players to entice them to come to Arkansas. That's the environment that's happening in Division I. And, you know, to be honest with you, not mostly around men, right? But some of the highest NIL earners, LSU gymnasts, Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark. You know, there's a reason that the State Farm guy was with her on senior night, was because she's getting money from State Farm, or she's getting money from Nike now, because that's now allowed under these new rules. But it's really becoming sort of not at all the NCAA that I used to, you know, that I've known all along. So, and of course, making sure that this, you know, that we have the ability to set our own rules and basically, you know, not leave ourselves open to legal cases. I went the wrong way. So this is probably the biggest threat. I don't know how many of you follow the news enough to have heard about the Dartmouth men's basketball team. Right? I know Betsy's a Dartmouth grad. Dartmouth men's basketball basically, I say sued Dartmouth, but they went to the National Labor Relations Board to be classified as a union. And you know, the NLRB is, I will say, leans left in terms of their you know, their vision around supporting unions. And so they were successful in being named from the NLRB perspective as a union at Dartmouth College. Now, meanwhile, Dartmouth doesn't offer athletic aid, right? So these young men are at school without having athletic scholarships, but that in some ways was probably a better test case for them. Because the issue is control, right? The coach controls when I practice, the coach controls when I have my meals, the coach controls when we play the games, they control the off-season workouts. And so right now, Dartmouth is appealing, but it could really, so we have that going on with the NLRB around you know, whether or not student athletes have the right to unionize. One bill has been filed in the state of New York, which says that student athletes in the state of New York would bargain with the conferences. I was like, whoa. You know, they would bargain with the conferences as a bargaining entity. I hope that it hasn't advanced out of committee yet. But those are the things that I never thought 25 years ago that I'd be tracking on, is where bills are in state legislatures, but that's what happens. And so here, you know, just the impact alone around what would happen to Olympic sports. If you think about, you know, for me, if I think about St. Michael's or Middlebury, that has, you know, 500 student athletes, and you're paying them minimum wage for 20 to, if you have to pay them while they're on the road for a game, you know, you're going to approach millions right off the bat, and it would put the school, it would end college athletics as we know it, right? It would end opportunities for women. It would end, you know, anything around Olympic sports. You know, of course, international student athletes already, you know, can't earn NIL money because it impacts their visa status, but they can't get paid and come to school here in the States.
Julie,
Yeah.
Do colleges ever charge admission to people to come and watch games?
Yeah.
Do they?
Yep.
Which sports?
In our league, primarily football and men's and women's basketball. Some schools make the conscious decision to not charge. It costs more for them to staff a ticket gate than it does for the revenue they may bring in. But you know, if you, I would suspect. I mean, my son plays lacrosse now, and we've been charged probably half of the time on the road. So it really depends on the cost-benefit analysis of what a school might do. But it wouldn't be enough to offset. Certainly what it would cost to pay.
It seems like it would offset the cost
Yeah.
of the program.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah. Although, I mean, if you think about you know, on average, outside of your biggest draws, right, skip out from Iowa, having lines around the block and being able to, you know, tickets on the secondary market going for a lot, you're not talking about a lot of people, right? 100 or 100 people at a game overall, or a field hockey game that's really difficult to enclose and charge. So it would it would change the face. We charge for all of our championships. We say we were going to put a priority on the fact that it's the postseason and it's meaningful, and the NCAA events are charged for, but some schools don't charge for regular season. A lot of them don't. You know, this is, I can't even tell you how big this is, that, you know, there's some pretty concentrated campaigns around trying to get to our legislative delegations, right, congressional delegations. I think they're starting to listen. You know, this is a really interesting fight because we're not getting anywhere with either side, right, the Republicans or the Democrats, and so in a lot of ways it's just like everything else, it's just sort of tied up. The Democratic, there's some key leaders in Congress that want to see student-athlete Bill of Rights, that, you know, want to see them get benefits. There's you know, restraint of trade. There's anti-union. I mean, you name it, it's been discussed. So we hope for some bipartisan support. And I don't know how many of you know that Charlie Baker, the former governor of Massachusetts, long-serving Republican governor, who was voted the most popular governor in the entire country as a Republican in probably the bluest state outside of Hawaii, is the NCAA president. So he retired, and he said nothing in politics prepared him for what he's encountered in intercollegiate athletics. Yeah, yeah. Secretary Gates told us at one of our meetings that he had literally planned wars that were easier than trying to work through the NCAA, you know, the NCAA governance structure. So there's not easy answers here, right? Because there's a lot of people that would fall on the side of these students, athletes, are providing a service for the institution. You know, and we can talk till we're blue in the face about the value of an education and how it prepares you for life after college, and the value of that scholarship or that opportunity to attend college. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of money flowing into college athletics. And so it'll be interesting, you know, now that you sort of, if you're hearing about this stuff for the first time, now having an awareness of following some of those issues is going to be super important for the future of college athletics. So these are just some more things around, you know, if you had to pay every student athlete, whether they were from a revenue generating sport or not, but because they were employees of your institution, you would quadruple probably your existing budget. And you couldn't do it. It would be completely unsustainable. So it'll be interesting. And some of these cases that are winding their way through courts, there's one in Pennsylvania that it wouldn't matter if it was a revenue generator. And they're not looking to seek a portion of the revenue generated, they're just seeking to be paid as employees. So it's a game changer. You know, the negative stories go on. Sports betting, right? Legalize sports gambling. I mean, if you haven't picked up the newspaper and read about kid misses a shot at the end of the game and getting death threats, right? Or making a shot at the end of the game, and it caused the over-under. I'm not a gambler, so I don't even understand it all, but the integrity of what we do is at stake here. So, you know, Governor Baker, I still call him Governor Baker, President Baker really wants to see prop bets banned across the country. We don't know if that'll be state by state. You know, hey, which side of the floor is Caitlin Clark going to shoot from first, right? Like things like that. There's bets on, you know, crazy stuff. You probably hear about it mostly around the Super Bowl time, like the crazy list of prop bets. But they're now, you know, legalized sports gambling because it represents an unbelievable revenue stream for the states. And that's why Delaware was the first one to really test it. Delaware and New Jersey. That's why, you know, the NCAA never had an event in Vegas because of sports, legalized sports wagering in Vegas at the casinos. And now every state has something. So now we're having events in Vegas because it doesn't matter anymore because every state you can bet, practically every state. Massachusetts, I think it's going in either this summer or it just went in legalized sports betting, so you can make, you can make bets on college sports. And quite honestly, this isn't just the biggest, things. We knew that we heard that there was a line on the Franklin Pierce Assumption football game. When I tell you that is not a good game, right? But there's a line on Franklin Pierce, Division II Franklin Pierce Assumption football. I'm like, well, those people need a life to be betting on that game, but people are taking their money. So that's the environment. So again, another issue for us to be dealing with in terms of, it's not just suiting up. I talked about NIL and how the schools are trying to, right now, NIL is really, I'll go back. NIL is really driven by the state laws. I don't know that Vermont has a law around NIL, but certainly Connecticut does. Name, image, likeness. So student athletes can profit, but basically the states and state leadership, and it started down South Florida was the first state to enact state legislation, in California, who's very pro, sort of student athlete, were the first states to actually get state laws that said these student athletes can earn money from their name, image, and likeness, and the colleges can't do anything about it. So basically, they took the NCAA and said, you have your rules, but we're going to one-up you, and we're going to create a state law. And now there's 50 different state laws that have 50 different intricacies of them all. And so you're recruiting someone from Massachusetts to go to school in Florida, high school, what are the rules around high school? Most high school associations are still precluding earning money on your name, image, and likeness, but pretty soon no one's going to be able to stop them because now these high schoolers are like as visible as anybody else in their recruiting game, right? So there, and the collectives are cropping up around most Division I institutions now have collectives, which is donors donating to the collective. So like the quarterback from, I don't know where he ultimately ended up, but the collective at Florida offered the quarterback $13 million to sign with Florida, but then they ultimately, when the contract was signed, it became pretty obvious that the collective didn't have the $13 million to give him. So then he broke that agreement and he went somewhere else for $7 million, right? So, I mean, it is literally part of it. And now with the transfer portal, now there's no restrictions because we were sued over restricting student athlete movement. You couldn't before go to a school and transfer to another school without sitting out a year. Now it's gone, right? We got sued. They said it's restraint of trade. There was a court injunction in October that completely changed the landscape. So now if you watched any college basketball games during March Madness, you would have heard the announcer say, well, Johnny went to Michigan and then he went to Tennessee and now he's at Texas because now you could do that. Technically the women can, it happens much more in the men's, on the men's side, but, and they're being induced by, these collectives who the coaches aren't supposed to be working on, and it's not supposed to be induced by pay for play and inducements that are impermissible, but let's be honest that there are people getting to these people and getting to their handlers in high school. And of course, at our level, St. Michael's just had a record-breaking year. 24 wins, went to the Sweet 16 of the NCAA. And poor Eric Eaton has to re-recruit his whole team because now in Division I, if you're a good Division II program, you have to beg your guys to stay because Division I programs are going to say, come here and we'll give you money, right? So it's terrible. It's not at all what we signed up for. No, it's awful. But this is the stuff we deal with. On the positive side, the NCAA signed beginning this September a $920 million media rights deal that largely focuses around women's sports. The support in the $110 million annual agreement that puts the valuation around, in women's basketball, I think around $70 million a year towards women's Division I women's basketball. It's too bad that they couldn't wait like 7 more months and then get the numbers from this year's basketball championship. But this will be, game-changing. It stays on the ESPN platform, but it starts to provide additional exposure for women's sports and sports that maybe weren't on the platform before. A lot of it's still digital streaming, but again, how people consume their media is, I mean, we cut our cord 2 weeks ago for the first time, but my kids had never watched television on a television. They only watch it on their phone or on an iPad. So streaming is real. It's here to stay. So this is pretty important. And what you heard if you listened to the women's games in March Madness was giving units. I don't know how many of you listened carefully to any of the broadcasts if you watched the women's games, but the participating schools in the men's basketball tournament earn money for being there, and then they earn money for each win that they have. And it can translate into millions of dollars because the NCAA generates almost 95% of its revenue through the contract to televise the men's basketball tournament. So now maybe for the first time there'll be some movement on some revenue for the women's teams that participate. And as I said, just the growth in women's sports. This is outside of the Cleveland Arena, waiting to get in. This is one of the teams arriving for the Final Four. That's the sold-out game, record-setting, sellout crowd, highest all-time attendance for women's basketball. And then this is, of course, the numbers, 18.7 million watched it on ABC and ESPN, that final between Iowa and South Carolina. And so, again, ESPN's probably sitting there saying, wow, we got a good deal, right? Because if they were negotiating now, which is only going to be, I'm sure there's a window, right, of all these media agreements. There's always live look-ins. In probably 3 years' time, they'll be able to look in and maybe adjust. But kudos to the people that negotiated that deal in September. It was a long time coming. And let's hope that the momentum here, one of the things about women's sports in general is the public loves like the individuals, right, the personalities. And so it was really cool because it became mainstream. I don't know if any of you stayed up to watch Saturday Night Live the last couple of weeks, but the last 2 weeks have each focused had women's basketball on Saturday Night Live, a parody on Charles Barkley not being able to name a single male in the men's tournament and being able to name Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and Paige Beckers. So, it's really, and then this week Caitlin Clark was actually on Saturday Night Live, which was really cool ahead of the draft. Of course, important for the group that's here tonight, Title IX, and just always ensuring that we're doing what we can to support student athletes. Obviously there remains participation gaps. There remains gaps in administrative participation, but clearly we're going the right direction, and the NCAA is probably as cognizant of equity in terms of equitable treatment between men's and women's sports as they ever have been. There was a real wake-up call a couple years ago when the weight rooms were different at the Division I Final Fours, and so now it's much more part of an operating policy, which it obviously always should have been. But so the NCAA today has 45 women's championships. And there's still, of course, a gap of about 70,000 in opportunities for between men and women. So, yeah. They're wading into it, yes. The current NCAA policy is that the association follows the national governing body's policy on hormonal levels. So if track and field sets it at this, then to participate, you would meet the same threshold for to participate in NCAA sports. It is a very polarizing issue, of course, but you know, I think as long as we're being fair in terms of consistent application of, you know, it used to be a few years ago, it was if you were receiving, and there's differences, right, for which way you've transitioned, what you could do, but certainly Leah Thomas brought a lot of visibility to the issue swimming last year, and of course winning national championships. So that when I showed you that NCAA structure, that's an issue that's being discussed and really worked on at the Board of Governors level, because whatever policies we adopt would be applicable to all three divisions. A division couldn't pick and choose. That would be an association-wide one, but certainly one that, you know, I feel like we have to approach with all sensitivity and do what we can to support, you know, student athletes from, you know, wherever they are on that spectrum of participation. So right now, the current policy is that we would follow the National Governing Board, and there's differences. Swimming has a different level than track, that has a different level than you know, soccer or whatever. So this is just, I wanted to just highlight this because as women in administrative roles, part of how we've gotten women into the chairs of being directors of athletics and associate directors of athletics is because every college athletics department has to designate someone as the senior woman administrator, and so it is the highest. It should be the highest ranking woman. If you have an AD that's a female, she can designate someone else. It should provide leadership to both men's and women's programs. It is absolutely not just defined to be, oh, you take care of women's sports and we'll take care of the men's sports. That still happens, and you are constantly educating on the importance of that type of the role itself. You know, so it's not your longest serving, it's not your oldest one, and again, not just taking care of women's sports. But this has really become, over the last 40 years, a primary way, and I apologize again because this is really small, but the directors of athletics overall, this is in all divisions, 75% of athletic directors are men, and 25% is women, but that's a 20% increase since 1981, right? So in Division I, 85% of athletic directors are men, and 15% obviously. In Division II, 76% are men, and in Division III, 67%. So over here, this is student athletes. Student athletes across all divisions. Male student athletes still make up 56% of all student athletes. And, you know, of course, some of that's the sports and the size of the rosters, right? And so it's closing, the gaps are closing because schools or institutions are adding more women's teams. Head coaches, 94% of head coaches in men's sports are men. Not surprising. There are 6%. Most of those, we have some of those, like we have women who are leading men's track and field or men's swimming, men's cross country, sometimes men's tennis. But, you know, I think there'll be the day when we see a woman leading a men's basketball team. And actually, NYU won a national championship with a female head coach of a men's soccer team. So it'll happen. It'll probably happen in all three divisions. This is 95%. And then here, of course, is, I have a t-shirt that said, "The future is women coaches," is women coaches, meaning women as coaches. But these numbers have really, you know, not made as much progress. 59% of all women's sports in the NCAA are coached by men. And a lot of that is because still we have little girls that were coached by their dads, and then high school coaches are men, and then you get to college and they're comfortable having men coach them. And so there's still barriers to entry there, and I hope we live to see that these numbers will really change. But so 58% in Division I are men, 63%, and then 57%. So those numbers, those haven't moved. They're increasing a little bit, but it's still, we got a ways to go. And then, of course, there's 97 conference commissioners across all three divisions. There's now going to be 7 in Division II. There's, I think, 25 of the 44 in Division III are women. In Division I, lately there's been, women leaving and being replaced by men. So it'll be interesting to see. Again, it's sometimes I like to say it's like see her, be her, right? So equality matters. You need to see a female athletic director or a female athletic trainer or a female president in order to know that you can be them. And then I think I'm nearing the end because I know we're, so this is participation numbers. Thought I'd throw that out there. This is back in 1981. So in 1981, there was 74,000 women playing college sports, and today there's 200, as of last September, 231,000 roughly. And the men have gone from 169 to 301. And these are the number of sports teams. So the women are this dark purple line. So in 1981, there was 4,776 teams in college for women, and today there's 10,932. So that's been absolutely you can see that growth. It's awesome. It is interesting though, because there's 8 million students that play high school sports. So you go from 8 million to about 530,000. So there's definitely room for more, but it costs money. And then the bit of trivia, the sport for boys that has the highest chance of playing in college is actually boys lacrosse. Because there's big rosters and a growing number of teams being sponsored in men's lacrosse on the college level. So you have about a 14% chance of going from high school to college in boys lacrosse. And in girls, the 33%. So granddaughters or daughters, if you play ice hockey, you have a 33% chance of playing from high school girls ice hockey to competing in college. Because there's not a lot of them playing high school girls ice hockey, but it is pretty interesting. And then, of course, the 3 highest participation numbers in high school boys are football, track and field, and so you have about a 7.5% chance of playing high school football and going on to compete in college football. So, and the girls, the highest high school sport is track and field. Across the country, and the second highest, what would you think the second highest is? Nope. No? Volleyball.
Really?
It is massive everywhere but in Vermont, right? Because Vermont doesn't even have it. They dropped it when I worked for America East. UVM used to have volleyball, and Vermont didn't have it. I think it's coming back as a high school sport now. Yeah. It is the single biggest increasing sport for girls in the high school level across the country, and the Nebraska played a volleyball match in their football stadium, and did anybody see that? 92,000 people went to the volleyball match.
No.
Yeah, in September. I have friends that went. They said it was unbelievable to have the growth of a sport like that. So volleyball is huge, as I said, everywhere but Vermont.
Yeah.
It goes track and field, volleyball, and then girls soccer in high school. Yep, and so it'll be, and then basketball and softball. Softball also is really big. I even remember, this is just some participation changes year to year over, and I'm happy to send this, if Mary, if you want to send out this deck, you certainly can, but this is sort of saying, again, some of those chances of playing from high school, chances to play in college, and then what are the chances that you go pro. So the WNBA draft was last night, and I think they drafted 33 players, but there was like 3,700 draft eligible women, and so you're looking at a less than 1% chance of going pro. But if you ask, there's probably 50% of student athletes in across the country that think that they have a chance of going pro. So she got picked by Indiana, which is, it was like, everyone's like, can you imagine if Indiana said, gotcha, I'm going to pick somebody else. But they had already sold out half of their games, and they went from having one game on national television last year, the Fever, to 36. The Caitlin Clark effect is real. But then I saw a graphic this morning. It said 2.2 million people watched the draft. And before, their highest thing had ever been like 500,000 people watched the draft yesterday. So it's crazy. And so I'll leave you, I think this is the last one I have, just talking about the future for women in sports. And there's a program that's been pretty successful in developing new sports, and again, all about the developing opportunities in teams. It's called the Emerging Sports Program, and basically it's a pathway for sports to become, who told me that their granddaughter's equestrian? Somebody did. Oh yeah, Marion. So equestrian is an emerging sport for women. So basically, the magic number here is 40, and if you hit 40, then you can make your way towards an NCAA championship. So sports that have come through that were emerging sports that now have their own championship. There's NCAA beach volleyball, NCAA women's rowing, women's ice hockey, women's water polo, and women's bowling. Those are all 5 NCAA sports. And now actually bowling has they're all, beach volleyball's got well over 100 institutions. So to get started here, really the national governing bodies usually throw support behind it, encourage institutions through grant money to consider adding these sports. These are all for women. It's like cheerleading, but stunting, but not cheering. You don't cheer. It's just about the actual mechanics and athleticism around just the stunting. It's pretty amazing, but I can tell you that, so this one became a sport just last August, made it onto this list, but acrobatics and tumbling was already on there, and those two organizations don't get along at all. They're competing for the same girls, the same gymnasts who aren't doing gymnastics anymore, or the same cheerleaders that want to do, that are great at the tumbling, because so much of cheerleading now is the athleticism and the acrobatics around it. So probably we're going to see acrobatics and tumbling hit. They're at 37 already before we see stunt, because by and large most institutions are choosing one or the other. Triathlon, women's wrestling, fast moving. Again, everywhere but in the Northeast. Wrestling has 51 teams already. It'll likely be an NCAA championship sport for women by 2026, so 2 years from now. And it's a growing sport at the high school level, girls wrestling. And again, if you think about equity, why is it just boys that wrestle? So, girls that have been watching Brothers and are like, well, hey, why can't I? And so now you're finding there's 51 college teams to participate on. So it's pretty amazing, actually. And I left here up next, women's flag football. We've been on a couple of conference calls, and this is the first time that this hasn't sort of happened from the ground up, but more the top down. Women's flag football is actually going to be an Olympic sport in 28 in LA. And so all of a sudden, as you saw, 75% of the rosters of Olympic sports are coming from college. And all of a sudden, people are like, whoa, there's no flag football teams. There's no women's flag football teams. So now the NCAA is getting behind it. Charlie Baker's been on, out there talking about it. USA Football and the NFL are partnering to incentivize institutions. And I think where we know that it's going to happen is on the Division II and III level, because one, all these institutions are enrollment-driven institutions, and Division I institutions, by and large, don't want to put a lot of additional dollars. They're trying to win national championships in the sports they sponsor. And so I think we'll see women's flag football added to that list. And look, there's no equipment charge costs, right? You need a flag. It's likely to be 5-on-5, so not like your traditional thing. Likely, as I understand it, it's 5-on-5 or 7v7. It's big internationally. It is a high school certified sport in 9 states and being voted on this spring by 6 more, including Massachusetts and New York, and Vermont is in discussions about sponsoring this. So be on the lookout for girls high school flag football. It's run cross field. So you can fit 3 flag football across, and you can, it's like quarters. I've never seen it, in practice. And the thing is that it represents new opportunities on college campuses, because by and large, most of the women that would ever be thinking about that on your campuses are just intramurals. But there's no club, so this will be new enrollees to your institute. So college presidents love that. They're like, send me, This is the rub on Title IX, right? Almost all but one of our schools have more women enrolled than men, right? Most 60-40, 65-35, 55-45, but the gap is big. So the college presidents want to see male enrollment develop, but you can't, you can't really do that through sports and well, you can have a history of adding women's sports in order to meet Title IX, but it's a real interesting dynamic at play, because every college president wants male enrollment because the women are coming to their campuses in big numbers. So, but of course, the way to close the participation gap is in adding women's opportunities. So be on the lookout. Women's flag football, you heard it here. Yeah. Haven't heard curling yet. No, but it's an Olympic sport, right? I don't even know if there's probably the one barrier is facilities, right? I mean, that's the thing when you're talking about this list of sports. Like every athletic director will say, if I don't need a locker room, or I don't need a playing field, right? I'm into it, But now you're telling me acrobatics and tumbling is going to be in the same gym that I have volleyball and basketball on, or you're going to run, women's flag football on a field, because our schools only have one field that is already run. It's going to likely be a spring sport, so you're on the field with men's lacrosse and women's lacrosse. That's doable, but we have. Schools that are sharing one field for football, men's soccer, women's soccer, and field hockey. We just don't have, our schools don't have.
Ice hockey.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So we have we're the only conference in the entire Division II to have men's ice hockey, but only one of our schools have a rink. So, you can do things, right? We have 10 track and field teams, but only 2 of them have an outdoor track, So, it's interesting to see the sacrifices. This is not the SEC, as I said. There's a real difference here in terms of facilities, in terms of how schools get through it all. But and then of course the athletic trainers don't want to see any of that, because the notion that college sports is just played in the season that you're in is no longer. It's year round. So, and that's obviously a lot of stress on everybody. So I know I went way over. I apologize. And then this is a very, another proponent organization. This is one that I served on the board of directors, but it's similar, I think, to the AAUW in terms of their entire existence is to champion women. It's now women leaders in sports. It used to be women leader in college sports. It's now women leader in sports, because it really doesn't matter what level of professional or college. So, but I thought it was pretty cool, because I think it actually really meshes well with the with the AAUW. So, and then, thank you. Yeah.
NCAA get their money? I mean, where does that come from?
So there's a $1 billion with a B, television contract with CBS. Well, it used to be CBS, but it's now really Turner, Warner Brothers Discovery. It's sort of had different names over time, and so the auditors will tell you that it is obviously a dependency that's risky business, which we found out about during COVID, because the revenue is derived from one event. So, and the football money, which generates probably $3 billion annually, is outside of the NCAA due to some court cases that happened back in, I think, the 80s. And so the football revenue and the bowl systems is outside of the NCAA structure. The Fiesta Bowl or the Orange Bowl or the Rose Bowl are operated by the conferences and not by the NCAA. So they retain the money, and those conferences are probably paying out their member institutions $50 or $100 million a year in football money. But the NCAA itself generates about, it might be more closer to 92% now, but it's significant money through that one television contract, and then the rest would come from other media rights agreements, ticket sales, sponsorships, and then they take in that money and they give a percentage to Division II. So of the entire NCAA budget, Division II gets 4.37% of the money. There are some people in Division I that say that's 4.37% more than we should. They don't believe in socialism like I do in that case. And then that generates about $60 million for the Division II budget, and then the Division III budget, which has 450 member institutions, is even smaller. They get about 3.8%. And then all the rest of the money is held in Division I and association-wide, and it is either distributed to conferences and institutions through various levels of, there's all sorts of distribution funds, but the primary generation of dollars is through men's basketball. And that's why it gets all the attention it does. Last year was the first time that March Madness was trademarked, which was trademarked solely for men's basketball. Last year, it was the first time it was duly trademarked for men and women without a difference, right? March Madness meant March Madness, whether you were playing women's basketball or men's basketball. So that is, when COVID hit, it hit March 15th and shut down the world, right? I'm going to keep forever my email that said, don't worry, we'll be back April 15th, right? We're going to take a 3-week break. It was, obviously, there was all sorts of insurance policies, event cancellation insurance. Not one person ever thought that there would be a global pandemic that would shut down the Final Four. And so CBS didn't have to pay out that year. So the revenue for that year was basically, I mean, they were held whole because the NCAA had insurance. The Division II had $15 million of insurance, but you can believe right now we can't get event cancellation insurance anymore. Just like we can't get director and officer insurance. I don't know if anybody's in insurance here. We can't get director and officer insurance anymore without paying crazy high premiums because everybody was suing each other over membership changes or over student athletes suing presidents over making these decisions, and so now it's really hard to get D&O. We can't get concussion, and we can't insure student athletes that play in our conference for concussions. It's an exclusion. So with every instance creates another exclusion on the insurance front. So event cancellation is, so every year we just pray that the men's basketball tournament gets played in Division I. I'm not gonna lie. The checks come tomorrow. They come April 17th to fund the conferences. The check arrives via wire tomorrow, and I'm like, just waiting. But yeah, that's where all of our money comes from.
Okay, so if that's it, I can see
Yeah.
I can't